We have a real wonderful, different sort of treat for you today. Uh, Rob and Anissa, who are both here from In the Name of Grace, are here to talk to us about the organization that they have created and how they are maintaining it and keeping it thriving. I will leave all of that explanation to Rob and just simply say, Rob, thank you for being here. Anissa, too, thank you for hanging in there. And Rob, take it away.
I would just like to say one other thing, and that is, as all of us listen to Rob talk today, we are all going to be touched in different ways. Just know that, because his message might be personal, but it's also universal. And so be prepared to feel some spots in your heart that are really tugged at. And just as a way of saying thank you to Rob and Anissa, we owe our society in general owes a huge debt of gratitude to the two of you, to the four of you, for doing what it is that you are doing. So that backdrop needs to be set, because these are not just two ordinary people, everybody. These are two people who every day, with their own personal energy and wealth and love, are making an incredible difference in the lives of many people they don't even know. So please open your hearts and your minds as you are listening to Rob and Anissa, and I guarantee it will touch you.
Wish I'd said.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. I'm not sure I'm going to be worthy of that, but we'll do,
Yes, you are.
do our best. So first, thank you very much for allowing me the time this morning and allowing me to share time with you. Time is precious, so I deeply appreciate that. My name is Rob Elsey, and I am the president and one of the co-founders of an organization, local organization called In the Name of Grace. GRACE is an acronym, and it stands for Giving Recovering Addicts a Chance to Evolve. It allows them to evolve from whatever their addiction may be, independence of that addiction to, the dependency of that addiction to independence. And it does that through safe, sober living. I will get into that a little deeper in just a little bit. As I thought about this, I'd like to break my time down this morning in about 3 sections. First, I'll take a few moments to tell you about my own personal story, and then I'll explain a little bit about how that evolved into In the Name of Grace, what we do. And then I'd like to kind of end and wrap things up with a little bit about removing something I speak a lot about, and I'm very passionate about, removing the stigma of addiction, as well as the stigma surrounded by an addict, and kind of my philosophy on what the world can do to help with that. So if that's okay, that's kind of how I'll proceed. And if I jump back and forth a little bit among those 3 things chronologically, I apologize, but I speak better when I'm speaking more from the heart and not from a script. So I have a few notes here, but something may enter my mind and I'll pop backwards. So I'll try to keep that going with as much chronological flow as possible. Our own story, my wife and I, she's on the Zoom this morning, began with this in June 6, 2011, so nearly a decade ago. We discovered that our daughter, who was 18 at the time, and let me preface that my wife has been in her life since she was 5, but she's actually my daughter from a previous marriage, just FYI. But right after, about a week after she graduated high school, we realized that, and we thought, we had suspected that she'd been, experimenting, shall we say, with illicit drugs, marijuana. We knew she drank some, hadn't really had a lot of problems with her outside of just normal teenage stuff, but we did kind of suspect that she might have been heading down the wrong path. We called it to her attention one night on a Sunday night, brought up the issue of the use of marijuana and what the rules are in our household. And instead of dealing with the situation, she literally bolted out of the house with none of her belongings, wearing nothing but a pair of sweatpants and a t-shirt, in which we did not have contact with her for about a 90-day period after that. So that was when we realized, wow, this is a lot more than just a kid who wants to go get high every couple times a week or even whatever. Caitlin's journey with addiction very quickly spun into benzodiazepines. Her personal drug of choice was Xanax, which a lot of you may know is a type of a antidepressant or anti-anxiety med uh, that usually will spin into methamphetamine if it's not handled and got under control, in which in Caitlin's case, it took several years, but it did eventually spin into what became and what is currently still in her life, a very heavy addiction to methamphetamines. Uh, so that has kind of started the course of over the next several years, in and out of college, in and out of treatment centers, in and out of outpatient centers. We, through being released upon a treatment center when she was probably 19 years old, they recommended that she do some type of sober living. We didn't really know what that meant. We thought that meant living sober, which, well, yeah, she needs to live sober, certainly. No, it meant she needed to live in a sober living residence, a residence set up for people to live in recovery. And so we learned that in the Kansas City area, for the most part, those were Oxford houses. And we also noticed that all of the Oxford houses were on the Kansas side of the greater metro area. There are virtually none on the Missouri side. Didn't really think too much about it at the time, just made an observation of that. And I will tell you, over the last decade, as she's been in and out of recovery, the best times that we had with Caitlin were when she was living in an Oxford house and living the sober lifestyle and had the support of the peers in that house. And that's we'll always remember that. I would love to tell you that this story has a happy ending. I will tell you that it has a difficult ending with a lot of happiness around it. To this day, Caitlin is not sober. We truly do not know about her whereabouts. We haven't had contact with her in about a year and a half, coming up on 2 years. 2 years ago, January of 2019, Caitlin came to us needing help. I'm not sure she was wanting help. She had a 19-month-old daughter, Mariah, and she was in her first trimester of pregnancy. So we then, with the knowledge that we had, we somewhat operated our home as an inpatient treatment center to keep Caitlin clean and sober long enough to get the baby born. He was born very healthy, very happy. He is now 22 months old. His name is Joey. So how this turns out and where we're at today is Mariah and Joey, or Raya as we call her, are now our adopted children. They're our biological grandchildren, and they're our adopted children. Our adoption was official in September of last year. We've had guardianship of Joey since the day he was born, and he's never known any other care outside of myself and my wife. Mariah, unfortunately, not quite that pleasant. She had a little rough start the first 19 months. She's an amazing, brilliant young lady, and she's doing very well and thriving. We do have some emotional issues that we're working through from some trauma, but we're working through it, and we're convinced that she will continue to thrive. So the blessing surrounding this is these two beautiful children that we watch every day. And if my lip quivers a bit as I talk, I apologize. It's emotional, but I love sharing it because I think people need to understand where this is going. I get to see my daughter's beautiful spirit before addiction took that from her, because it robs you of everything you have, including your own personality, especially methamphetamine addiction. So we get to see her beautiful spirit and her smile in her eyes and these two beautiful children every day. So it is a wonderful story. It is amazing. I will tell you that my wife and I are middle-aged. I'm in my mid-50s. My wife is in her early 50s. I won't say she's my age because she's not. And she's listening. But it's not where we thought we would be at this age with two very, very small children, that we pick up. We get up every morning, take to daycare. We pick them up after work. Our evenings are quite a bit different than they used to be just a few years ago. But we're very blessed. Some of the blessings, we do live within a few hundred yards of my wife's parents, my in-laws. And it always feels weird to call them my in-laws because they're my family. But we live within a few hundred yards of them. So they've been able to step in and help and watch these two children grow up as their own grandchildren. We are blessed that financially we're able to deal with the burden of daycare and things like that. And we are physically in good health, and fitness is a very big part of our life. I'm actually a personal trainer for a living. So we're able to keep up with two little ones. I was at gymnastics yesterday with Joey, chasing him around the room, and outside of probably a few more gray hairs and a little more wrinkles, I look just like every other dad in the room. So I'm pretty proud of that. That's kind of where that is. I'm going to segue that into In the Name of Grace, and how In the Name of Grace came about, and how it's been played a role in my life, and then what it does for others. And Mickey, that was wonderful what you said about that. And first and foremost, please know that my wife and I, we are part of a wonderful team of board of directors, and then as well as Friends of Grace, which Mickey and Jeff both are, that have helped out, stepped in, and done some wonderful things. It takes a village, right? And I'll talk about that here in a little bit when we talk about stigma. We have a wonderful board of directors. It was simply an idea in my head back in October of 2015 that I told Anissa about one night we were out for an evening. And we then almost immediately enlisted the help of some very good friends, Nancy Whitworth and Doug Ballou. We knew that they were like-minded. We knew that they had a passion for helping people, and we knew that they had experienced the challenge of addiction, not in immediate family, but in extended family, and knew what it was like. And they also had been familiar with Oxford House and knew that it could help. So off we went. We were blessed that I got to listen to a lady named Liz Murray, who actually did our webcast a few weeks ago, and I heard her speak. And it just, I walked away from there. And at the time, our daughter was in an Oxford House in Omaha, Nebraska. And so I was feeling pretty good about life, in a pretty good place. And that's how we are, right? As parents, it's good and bad is if our kids are well, we feel really well. If our kids aren't well, it has a big impact on us, whether it be physical health, mental health, whatever. They struggle, we struggle. And I think that happens for whatever age your children are. But we were feeling really good about it. And it just dawned on me, it's like, why aren't we doing something to help people in recovery? And I had no idea what that was. I had no idea what it would look like. I just knew we needed to do something. Fast forward a little bit, and then I start kind of digging into, I've been in real estate and a real estate investor for about 20 years. And I wanted to figure out who owns these Oxford houses, because when you walk in one, on the outside looking at it, it's simply a house in a nice residential area that looks like a home. It may have one or two extra cars in the driveway because it has multiple people living there, but you can't tell that it's not just a single family living in a single family home. You walk inside, however, and you'll notice there's some differences that have been done to the home to make it adequate to house anywhere from 6 to, in our case, we have one house that has 18 residents in it in a single family home. There's been remodeling done. And so I thought, well, somebody is doing this work. Are they owned by Oxford? Are they owned by a landlord? What? And I wanted to figure out that. As well, I was wondering, why are there none on the Missouri side? And there are a few, but they were in not really great areas. And I drove by a couple and thought, wow, I'm not sure that's where I'd want my daughter to be. And I just had a lot of questions. So we dug into it, and we found out that the homes were individually owned by real estate investors, every house, and that Oxford, was in charge of managing the houses. And what had happened is Kansas was thriving because of an organization called Friends of Recovery, FORA. And in Missouri, there wasn't anything like that. So there was no outreach program. There was no person or no group of people or no direct link from these houses back to Oxford House. They were trying to do it on their own with no help, and they were struggling. And so we got a hold of Oxford, and we found out that what they needed was outreach. And we didn't even know what that meant. We meant what that is. That's a person on the ground that is trained to educate the houses to be able to stand up on their own and manage themselves. And that's the beauty of Oxford, is that there is no one person in each house. There is no hierarchy. You each have assigned jobs, and there is a president, and that's more for, they run their house meeting every week by Robert's Rules of Order. And if you ever would attend a house meeting of any Oxford house, especially in the chapter here in Kansas City, it is ran smoother than a lot of executive board meetings. They do a wonderful job. But so there is no paid person in each house. If someone gets in trouble and uses or drinks, it's up to the house to call that person, have a meeting, hold them accountable, ask them, worst case scenario, if they don't, come clean with what's happened, they drug test them, they alcohol test them. If they test positive, they then have 30 minutes to get their stuff and get out of the house. And I realize that sounds really harsh, and it is harsh. It's happened to our daughter on more than one occasion, one time which we actually had turned her into the house because we knew she was going back to the house high. These people are learning to protect their environment. They're in very early recovery, a lot of them. And what they have to learn is when they're surrounded by the support of their peers that have the same struggles, they have to be able to help each other out. And sometimes help isn't, or actually help is the exact opposite of what the addict may want, because what the addict really wants is to be enabled. And so there is no enabling. So that wasn't happening on a daily basis in these houses. There were a few of the houses that were sick that needed to be cleaned out. Fast forward, we struck a contract with Oxford House, and the contract was pretty simple. They would hire somebody to come in and be an outreach worker. It would cost X amount of dollars a month. And at the end of the month, after they paid out the outreach worker and all his expenses, they would then bill us. We had an idea of what that would cost on a monthly basis per a budget, and we simply went forward. At that time that we first started, they hired him part-time, and I don't remember what the actual numbers were, but I knew we had enough in the bank in the name of grace for maybe 6 months. And at the end of 6 months, we wouldn't be able to continue to pay that bill. Oxford knew that, we knew that, we knew what the task was now at hand. And we just had to figure out how to get there. So as far as I know, we're the only third party in the country that is funding outreach all through private funding. As of today, we have not obtained any civil funding through any government regulatory entity, no, not at the city level, not at the county level, certainly not at the state or the federal level. We have been blessed with some grants from local other nonprofit organizations, and as well as some charitable contributions from some corporations and some trusts from some corporations, as well as small family trusts and things like that. Along with, we have some people that tithe to us on a regular basis, and then we run a couple of fundraisers each year. So through that, we've managed to keep up the pace. The gentleman, his name is Lance Whitney, who is our outreach worker. He now is full-time, has been for quite a while. Lance came in, there were, I think, 8 houses at the time. He closed 4, cleaned up 4, and has opened 13. And that number should work out to we have 18 houses, one of which is so large we actually deem it to be 2 houses because it has 18 residents in it. So our goal was to have 20 houses by the end of 2020, and that would have been X amount of beds, and we certainly exceeded that. So we may not have 20 physical houses, we certainly have the number of beds that we thought. With that being said, as of today, there is a need for probably minimum of 400 more beds in the Kansas City metro area for people in recovery. We have about 180 right now. That tells you how great this need is. Is Oxford the perfect solution for people in early recovery? There is no perfect solution because everyone's recovery is different. Not everyone makes it through Oxford and graduates an alumni successfully. Relapse is part of recovery. I heard that the very first treatment center our daughter was ever in, relapse is part of recovery. And I'll never forget hearing that because I told myself, no, that won't be us. She'll get this. She's a good kid. She's smart. We'll get through this. We'll help her. It wasn't about us. And I didn't realize that at the time. Addiction isn't about the family. Addiction isn't even about the addict itself. It's about the disease in their brain and their ability to overcome it. So with Oxford, they live on their own. They live in there. They pay their way each week. I think it runs about $120 a week is what their earned shared expenses are called. And they get to live there as long as they want, as long as they contribute, do their house chores, participate in house meetings, work some type of a recovery program, which is typically AA or NA, and are not disruptive and do not drink or drug. We have some residents that have been in the houses 6, 7, 8 years. We have some folks that are probably new today or will be interviewed this afternoon. And we have folks, the average stay is probably around 18 months. And I think the statistics say if someone in recovery stays in an Oxford house 18 months, 5 years later, they have something in the high 80% chance of still being in recovery. So it's a real step in the right direction. We've got to know a lot of these folks one-on-one. We've watched a lot of them graduate out and become alumni. It's pretty amazing. There's a lot of gratitude. you want to feel real gratitude, like I say, attend an Oxford house meeting or a chapter meeting and watch these people celebrate their recovery every day. It's pretty amazing. And I have not been tracking time. I apologize. So let me know where I'm at there, if I'm okay. Okay, thank you. I think this is probably a pretty good way to segue into addiction itself and the stigma of addiction, what that looks like, and how I came up with what I thought was a solution to help, and how I attack my life on a daily basis because of what I've been through. So first and foremost, it's a little shocking, but I'm going to go ahead and say it, and I apologize. But I'm fairly certain that when my daughter was probably 17, and growing up in a wonderful suburb in the Northland, attending one of the more prominent high schools here in the Northland, she put her letter jacket on. She was a 3-year letterman, hopped in her little convertible Mustang to drive to school on a Friday, whatever day of the week it was. And I doubt she thought, tonight I'm gonna go to this party and there's gonna be weed there and I think I might try it. I doubt she was thinking, because there's at least a 20% chance that if I try it, I will become addicted and I will spend the rest of my life on the streets. I doubt that was her intent. Did she make a decision to use an illicit, illegal drug? Certainly she did. Was it a conscious decision? Sure it was. Half a dozen other friends that were probably with her that night that I'm still in contact with that are now very high functioning adults with families, married, some of them with children, good jobs, graduated through college. Did they probably experiment with her that night? Sure they did. Unfortunately, they weren't one of the 20% of people that were born with an addictive gene. Addiction is a disease of the brain. It's not a rumor, it's not a myth, it's a scientific fact. It is a mental health issue. There's some really good movies out there and some issues. One of the best that I've seen so far was called Pleasures Unwoven, and it was written by a doctor that had got addicted to painkillers. He set out to prove that it was his choice and not a physiological issue. And in doing so, he proved that he had no control over it and is 100% physiological. He now lives in recovery. So addiction is a nasty disease. And it's the only disease that I know of that I can really wrap my head around that takes a perfectly good person with a beautiful spirit, a lot of potential, possibly high IQ, and completely demonizes and criminalizes them and can take them and turn them into a complete sociopath. And I think that's the real word. I mean, it turns you into a sociopath. Your craving for your next high is much, much greater than anything that your mind can reconcile. And you're willing to do a lot of things that you wouldn't be willing to do outside of that. Our daughter was raised in a good Christian family. She had Christian values. She was raised in church. We would have never anticipated it. And it was early on. You have this why me, as well as what did I do? What did I do? What could I have done? What could I have done? And you ask that over and over and over. And then you get some education and you get some help and you realize it isn't me. It wasn't me. It will never be me. I can't fix her. We can't fix her. She has to want to fix herself. So when you see someone struggling with addiction, they deserve a little grace. Now, I will say this. If someone in addiction, in the throes of their addiction, if they don't want help, it's a very large waste of your time, energy, and possibly your finances to try to help them. If they don't want it, you can't. And that's a very difficult situation to be in. And honestly, that's the situation we're with our own daughter. Flip the switch the other direction, reframe it, and you have someone that's hit their rock bottom and they really want help. As human beings, don't you think they deserve the grace to get that help? And we need to accept them for what they are, forgive them for what they may have done, and understand that moving forward, we can maybe see that life that they once had in their eyes and the spirit they had, and to become somebody that is independent, a functioning member of society, and no longer dependent on whatever their drug or alcohol or whatever their desire may have been that they were addicted to. Sure they do. And I see it happen every day through Oxford House. I see a lot of people that have been incarcerated. Our own outreach worker, his rock bottom was incarceration. Yeah, and he will tell you point blank, you would not have liked to have known him when he was in the throes of addiction. He was not a nice person. He's an amazing man now. You feel his spirit 100 feet away from him. You can feel it, you can see it. Just a big teddy bear of a human being that is giving back his blessing of recovery by helping others in recovery, giving them grace. So what I came to terms with that helped me, because I got to a pretty dark place several times through this 10-year journey, even after we'd started In the Name of Grace, a couple of relapses had happened. And this last one was very difficult because it did lead us to this, interesting situation of raising these two children as our own. I learned that you can drown in your own pity. Your circle of tears can be overwhelming. And you get to a point, it's very natural, especially as a parent or a loved one of someone in the throes of addiction. Why me? Why me? Why them? Why? We may be angry. We may look to the Lord. We may look to whatever it is that we deem our higher power and look for understanding and be angry. I learned to reframe it personally. It is no longer why me. It is now simply why. Why is this possible? Why can somebody be out there and not be able to find help? Why were there so few of houses in Missouri? The solution is something I can't fix. But I love this word, community. And I love the name of your organization, oneness. We're all human beings on this universe. And I think in a way we all belong to each other. Not that we owe each other anything, and not that we should hold each other necessarily accountable, because really our accountability comes within. But I think we are here, we need to be here for each other. And together we can make a difference. And we've proven that within the name of grace. Just a handful of like-minded people got together and said, what can we do? And really the solution was pretty simple. And we've been blessed for over 3 years now to meet our financial needs through just reaching out to the community. We are 100% an operating board. No one takes salaries. We have extremely low overhead. The cost of running a website, post office box, a few things like that. And almost about 99% of our funds go back to paying our invoices to Oxford. We'd love to grow it, that we can move it all the way across the state of Missouri someday. We'd love to have more than one outreach worker here in Kansas City to continue opening houses. We'd love to get to 40, 50, 60 houses. But at that point, this one gentleman would need some assistance. So what can we do? Well, we can quit thinking about why this is a problem and why it's affecting me and how it's affecting me, but just think about the world as one and just figure out a way to make a difference. I thought about this earlier this morning that, what if every person on the face of the earth saw somebody in need, whatever that may be. Maybe it's a homeless person on the corner at their stoplight. Maybe it's somebody they know. Maybe it's somebody at work, whatever it may be. And take a moment, reframe giving them a handout and what they can do to give them a hand up. Maybe it's you start your own non-for-profit. Maybe it's you find somebody, a non-for-profit that you believe in. Maybe you figure out what that cause is and you figure out what you can do to be part of that, even if it's given a couple hours a month, right? We all have the ability to do more. I will say, in closing here, I have more respect for people in early recovery and even long-term recovery than a lot of people that I get to meet on a daily basis, because I wake up tomorrow morning, it's Monday, I'll have to figure out how we're going to get the kids up, get them ready, get my food prepped for the day, get my appointments lined out. When I leave the house, I won't be back until about 6 o'clock tomorrow. That's what my day looks like. If I was in recovery, I would wake up tomorrow morning and the very first thing I would have to think about is, today is a day I choose to be sober and clean. Today is a day I will be sober and clean. Lord, please help me make today a day that I'm sober and clean. And then they'll live that for the next 12 or 14 hours until they go to sleep, to repeat it again, as well as all the tasks that you and I do to keep our lives running on a daily basis. So when you see someone in the throes of addiction, whatever that addiction may be, remember they need a little grace. And I guess in closing, that's really it. Together we can solve problems, and always remember to be kind and give grace. I appreciate your time today, guys. I hope it didn't take too much. I hope it resonates to some of you. And again, I just appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
The fact that I'm holding 2 Kleenexes, I think, and a whole box in front of me should be enough to say that I think it resonated with me. And The Daily Word is a book that I use every day. And I leaped ahead for some reason to Friday. And here's what I found. I weave the tapestry of my life. My life is like an intricate tapestry. There are threads of all kinds, of various colors and textures. Woven together, they create a design unlike any other, a beautiful and ever-evolving work of art. The decisions I make and the actions I take are the tapestry's colors and textures. Together, they create a pattern that is uniquely mine. The dark, tattered threads of the tough times are woven with rich, vibrant strands of unlimited possibility. The end of one thread is tied to the beginning of another in an ongoing creation. God is within each thread. I am grateful for my faith that helps me believe in possibility, and for my imagination, which fuels my vision. I weave my life into a most beautiful masterpiece.
Rob, thank you so much for sharing as you did.